So I recently had a week off work, and of course I had to go record shopping. So I wanted to show off the records that I grabbed, but also discuss some of the developments that I noticed within the price of both new and used records, and a lot of positive things that I think moving forward that us as record collectors can look forward to. So let's go. So I'll mention that not only did I have the week off work, I just come off of the end of fantasy football season, and I ended up winning a couple of leagues. So I had a random influx of about $1,300 that I did not expect. So I didn't actually spend all of it on records. I'm sure this would have been a lot more fun of a video if I had, but I still was able to have a little bit more freedom and flexibility to get some cool stuff, knock off a few items off my list. One of my resolutions for this year as far as a vinyl collector was to buy more used records, challenge myself to do my research, find titles that are maybe a little bit more obscure, that are a little bit cheaper. So in my whole stack of records I bought, I only bought 2 new records, so I wanted to show those off first. My first record is Clutch Blast Tyrant, probably my favorite record by the blues stoner rock band. Unbelievable record. I've been listening to this more and more lately, thought I'd pick it up. Also, something that I noticed about the price of new records, this is a double LP set. This was only like 23 Canadian dollars, and I've noticed that more and more records are coming back into stock that are in the $18 to $25 range, which, I mean, we keep hearing about how certain distributors are jacking up the price of their records, but I'm starting to see more records come out that are much more reasonably priced. So this is a super promising sign for me, and obviously an awesome record, and highly recommended to any fans of more modern rock music. This is a great record. Another one that I kind of treated myself to, that I've been looking for a vintage copy for a long time, just hasn't happened, but I got Isley Brothers, Go For Your Guns. Holy crap, like just unbelievable, amazing, like funk rock record from the late 70s. This was a music on vinyl limited edition pressing. I did a video a while back about records that have surprisingly great sound, and oddly enough, because of how good an Avril Lavigne record sounded that music on vinyl reissued, thought I'd pick this up, but this was a limited press. It was done on red vinyl. It sounds amazing, so much bottom end, very like sharp, very like punchy in your face. Awesome pressing. People online say that this is as good or even surpasses like an original pressing, so can't recommend this one enough. So that was all I bought for new records, and there are about 15 used records I picked up, most of which were very affordable, which I'll get into, but I wanted to show off the one more expensive used record I did pick up. I grabbed a copy of Hampton Hawes 4, so I've been really liking the contemporary reissue series that was, a number of the titles were put out last year, and I hadn't picked this one up, so I was at this record store and I was flipping through and I found the copies that they had, but they also had a used copy, and I discovered that this is actually a US mono original, and oddly enough it was the exact same price as the contemporary reissue. And honestly, you don't find original pressings of notable jazz albums usually even close to the same price as a reissue, so I thought, what the heck, I gotta go for it. Yeah, wonderful sounding record, super fun, playful record, really good kind of introductory jazz record as well. Sounds great, in awesome shape, very happy to have this one. So the rest of the haul are 14 used records, and I mean, lately in the past year or so, I've pretty much been buying new records, because used records, there hasn't been a lot of incentive. I'll find a used record that's okay and it's $20, or I can spend $30 and get something I really want that's new. So I just haven't really done it a lot. Every time I find a record that's interesting to me, it's $5, $10, $15, $20 more than I even think it's worth. So it's just really put me off of buying used records, which is what I really enjoy doing. I love digging, finding different versions, looking at the labels, learning more about them. So that's been kind of disappointing, but this haul, it seemed like everywhere I went had lots of used stuff, prices were good, availability was good, and in the end I got about 14 used records that, say about half of them are okay, but the other half of them are really good titles, and I only spent a little over $100 on them, which, crazy to think that I'm more used to buying 2 titles and it ends up being $80 or $90. So this was a welcome surprise, and I'm kind of shocked at the quality of some of the titles that I was able to grab. First title is this reissue of Ray Charles' Genius Plus Soul Equals Jazz Impulse title. I have a reissue of it, however, this is a mono version. The reissue I have is a stereo. I looked in the dead wax. It is a Canadian copy, but it does have the Rudy Van Gelder stamp. So I decided that I might as well go for it. It was only $16, so Sounds lovely, nice to have that contrast between the mono and the stereo pressing, and I don't know if I have many or really any Rudy Van Gelder masterings of albums, so really happy to have this one. One of the big culprits of why I had been spending so much money on new records is that there's just such an abundance of awesome audiophile type records, AAA reissues, Blue Note Classic, Tone Poets, Acoustic Sound Series, all these great titles. So I've kind of challenged myself to learn more about the history of hi-fi and the history of audiophile records, to find some stuff that's a little quirky, falling out of fashion, people aren't really looking for anymore, where there's great sounding titles that might only be $3 or $4. And one of the labels that I found is Audio Fidelity. Now I've been getting more and more into their stuff, and I ended up actually finding one of their more desirable titles. Most of their titles you can have for under $5 or $10, and most of them still sound pretty good. But I ended up getting this Louis Armstrong Plays King Oliver record. This one was actually reissued by Analog Productions, so I knew that the recording itself would be very good, and it's a wonderful title. This one was $20. I've seen this on Discogs selling median a lot higher, $80, $90, but I mean, it's a local store. I don't think they're thinking anyone's going to flip through their bins and want to pay $80 or $90 for this, but just the way his voice sounds recorded is so good. Just like he's right there in their living room with you. The rest of the band sounds really tight. Not as much soundstage as I would have liked, but an audiophile title through and through, and only $20 for really a collectible piece. Another audiophile title that I picked up was this Percussive Sounds of the Big Band, sort of a demonstration record. Actually musically not bad either. Definitely some stuff where they're trying to show sort of that sweeping from right to left. You'll hear snare rolls from right to left. Some hard panning that's a little bit awkward, but overall the music's actually pretty enjoyable, and it's a lovely sounding record. I thought I'd heard that people recommending this one. I'm not sure if this is this exact percussion album, but this one was only $7, and to me it sounds as good as most of the records that I'm paying $35 to $45 for his audiophile title, so why not take a risk on it? And I think this one paid off in the end. Picked up a live album that I've been looking for quite a while, but it just seems to have eluded me for the last bit. But the store ended up having two copies. One was twice as much as the other one for the exact same pressing in pretty much the same shape, but very happy to grab Joni Mitchell's Shadows and Light. So I've been listening to a lot of Joni lately. I've known that this album's existed for years, but I kind of avoided it, probably because it has one of the worst album covers ever. But over the summer, I rediscovered it on YouTube. I watched the full set. But if you're a jazz fan, people in her group included Jaco Pastorius, Pat Metheny, Lyle Mays, Michael Brecker, and she has backup vocals by The Persuasions. The set list on this is fantastic, late 70s Joni. The sound is unbelievable. I think this was done by Bernie Grundman. Yes, this was mastered by Bernie Grundman. Fantastic record. I ended up paying $16 for this, but yeah, if you see this, go grab it. If not, even just go on YouTube and listen to it, because it's such a good performance. Joni's killing it. The band's awesome. Must own for folk or even ECM jazz fans, because this is such a good record. Got a few progressive rock titles. I grabbed Camel's Moon Madness, which I didn't recognize the cover. I thought I'd heard this album before, but it turns out that this is an alternate cover that was on some later editions of the album. The original cover is on the inside, however. Just a really good progressive rock album. This was only $3, and it looks brand new. Well, I mean, the cover's pretty beat up and has quite a bit of ring wear, but the album looked brand new. It sounds really good. This is a fun listen to, and I love this camel in a spacesuit cover. It looks very goofy. Another progressive title I grabbed was Renaissance, A Song for All Seasons, an album that I was turned on to by Mikhail Ackerfeld from Opeth. I think he listed this as one of his favorites, just an album that is just like over the top, grandiose progressive rock from like the late 70s when it was so uncool to be making that kind of music. But yeah, another really good title and kind of a must own for most progressive fans. Only $6 too, so another deal that I got, and I kind of is the theme of a lot of these used records is how cheap they really were. And also grab Emerson, Lake and Palmer in concert. I've always wanted this because I thought it was cool that they recorded this in Montreal at the Olympic Stadium. I'm not a huge Emerson, Lake and Palmer fan for some reason. I thought this album would change that. It didn't, but cool to have in my collection at least. I don't know how much I'll be listening to this, but only $6. I think I've seen this before, maybe a little bit cheaper, but this is in really good shape, so I had to grab it. Over the past few years, I've noticed that prices of used records have skyrocketed, particularly with titles that are well known, where even if it's a new wave record from the early 80s that you would think is obscure and should only be worth $1, suddenly stores are charging $10 or $15, even $20 for it, just because it's become well known, because people see it so often. And this has left a lot of gaps in my collection where I just have avoided buying stuff because when I found it, it's either beat up or it's too expensive. So there's a ton of albums that I don't own that, frankly, I'm a little embarrassed that I don't own because they're so popular. But this was one of the first trips that I've gone on where I was finding those titles abundantly, and they were at prices that were very affordable and made sense to grab them. First one that I grabbed was Warren Zevon, Stand in the Fire Live. This was $8. I'm not like the craziest, biggest fan of his, but I do like a lot of his music. This has a lot of his bigger, more notable songs. I love Excitable Boy, Werewolves of London, Lawyers, Guns, and Money, but fantastic performance. And I think I've seen this one before where I was interested in buying it, and it was like $20 or $25 just for a standard edition. So finally getting this at a price that didn't break the bank was great, and I had a lot of fun listening to it. Another one that kind of shocked me, but I found a copy of Deep Purple's Machine Head, which I'm extremely late to the Deep Purple game, considering that I got into classic rock like 15, 20 years ago. But this was only $10, and it's a French reissue from, I believe, the late 70s or early 80s. Record looks unplayed. Played it, sounds great. Very excited to have it. I mean, when I've seen this, it's usually $20 or $25, and it's beat up. I've had that happen to me a couple times where I've just avoided buying it because it's stupid to pay that much for it. Hoping that someone you know who's maybe newer to the hobby, they've seen this album, they want to hear Smoke on the Water or whatever, they'll pay the $25 thing that's a good price when it's not. But finally, at a price that was actually decent. And they had some other Deep Purple albums that I ended up passing on because they were in terrible shape, but they were like $4 and $5 only, which for a band this famous in classic rock, you do not expect to see these days. So very promising. Grabbed a Canadian new wave classic, Martha and the Muffins. This is the Ice Age. One of my favorite album covers ever. I paid $8, which I think is maybe a little bit expensive. I know that this one was hard to get for quite a while, but I've just wanted this in my collection for a long time, so I saw it, the record's in good shape, went for it. So the last 5 records that I have are all pretty common records that I've seen a million times over the years and just haven't bought. And more recently, as I've started to dive more into the history of vinyl, I've been a little bit more interested in them. However, they're $15, $20 each for no particular reason. It's just stupid, but I kept finding records that are common, that should be cheap, and they actually were cheap. And I think that's sort of what I want to do moving forward, is grab a lot of these records, spin them, and really see if they're worthwhile. See if people who are younger, getting into the hobby, who maybe didn't grow up with a lot of these 80s like new wave bands in particular that maybe had a hit or two that sold a lot of copies of records, are these albums still worthwhile today, and should they belong in your collection? So I'm happy to start buying more of these records and really discovering the history of popular music more. And this trip really helped me out, and I grabbed some pretty cool titles. First one I grabbed, Fix with Reach the Beach, which was $4, which, I mean, that's not a great price, but that's what this record should cost. This was abundant. No one really talks about this anymore. I finally have a copy years after I probably should have got my first copy of it. Next, I have a bit of like a low-key audiophile title, but this is Ricky Lee Jones' Pirates. This was $5 for a US first pressing, which, I mean, there are a lot of copies of this record floating around. I think what I'm curious to do is buy as many as I can find and find kind of like the definitive pressing or definitive version. I think this is a great place to start, and yeah, for only $5, why not? Artist that I tend to buy a lot of his records whenever I find them, just because they are so abundant, especially in Canada. This is Bruce Cockburn with Stealing Fire. I think this was his second most popular album. It says Lovers in a Dangerous Time, If I Had a Rocket Launcher, Peggy's Kitchen Wall. Really, really like him. He's kind of called Canada's Bob Dylan, but I think his voice is a lot more pleasant. He was a lot more like alternative rock, especially in the 80s. And this album, whenever I found it the last year or so, is $20, and finally grabbing it for $3. Sounds great, awesome album, love Bruce, happy to have it. Kind of a goofy, quirky one, but I finally got a copy of the Jay Giles Band Freeze Frame, $3. This is a $3 album. I'm excited to dive into it and decide if this is a record that I should be recommending to younger folks who are wanting to get into the hobby, because this is an abundant album. It's silly, it has really goofy album artwork. Yeah, I'm happy to finally have this one. And last, I finally got a copy of Split Enz True Colors, kind of a cool post-punk new wave album, but also one of the more interesting albums because there's many, I think there's 11 or 12 different cover variations, as well as there's an etching on the album, so when you play it, it spins and makes a bunch of different colors and shapes. Very, very influential in a lot of kind of the weirder, like more gimmicky stuff that's happening with vinyl these days. So yeah, this is kind of a cool history piece when you think about it. So that is my haul. Overall, I'm very happy with the abundance of records and abundance of quality records I was able to grab at, frankly, prices that are very, very good. I know that we've kind of moved past the era of the dollar record and be able to go into a store and find a copy of Dark Side of the Moon for $2, but there's still a ton of titles out there that are actually really good that are only a few dollars, and I hope that this continues, and I will continue to be able to go to stores and find great titles, continue filling in those holes in my collection, finding great music for, you know, under $10 a record. So look forward to my videos in the future, because I think that's kind of something I'm going to be digging into a lot more. So thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.